Well, good afternoon. Welcome to the Dream Labs with Dr. Contrast Live. I hope all is well. And boy, before I begin, I just want to say how much I really appreciate your patience with me over the last few sessions here. We had a great meeting with a very highly skilled specialist on Tuesday with my wife, and so far it looks like we might be in pretty good shape here. This guy was very good and had a lot of interesting things to say, and looks like probably the most exciting part of the whole session was the fact that we ended it all up. They looked at us and said, fear not, we'll get this. So I just appreciate your patience with me missing on Tuesday of this past week because of that very critical appointment with my wife. But I thought we'd go back in today and just kind of turn the clock a little bit here and do some things here that I think are very interesting, hopefully to you as much as they are to me. And I'm just going to preface this whole stream by making a comment that I've always said in this series and really committed to it. And I think one of my great passions is watercolor. No, let me qualify that by saying I'm not good at it yet. I'm still working on it. It's a very difficult medium. I'm there's certainly no stranger to that, nor are you probably. But I think the thing that's unique about watercolor is it's so instantaneous and it's so refreshing and it's very quick and dynamic. And what I mean by that is that you've got to know how, let me rephrase that. We really need to know how to make decisions quickly and to think ahead of the game plan a little bit. And what I've done when I go through watercolor systems is I'm always thinking about knowing the end from the very beginning. For example, I've got a vision about what the program or what the sketch might look like or the watercolor study might look like. But at the same time, even though you make a comment such as like a platitude such as, well, know the end from the very beginning, that doesn't mean it's fixed. As we all know, going through the creative process, things will adjust and change dramatically and quickly if we're not careful about how to really control it. But at the same time, I think what I'm getting at here, the principle here behind the whole process of getting to know the end from the very beginning is to have at least an image in your mind's eye about what this thing is going to look like, what the character is going to look like, what the colors, what the composition is going to be. Now, with that being said, no problem at all for me, for example, in the middle of the whole thing, the midstream things shift a little bit, I'll work with that mistake. Sometimes that's when the miracles come about. And you'll see that in some of these watercolor studies that you'll look at here today. And my hope is that once we go through this portfolio, I've always said this, and maybe maybe I lack courage to get it all done, but I really want to take a chance maybe in the next few weeks, maybe in the new year, start doing some live watercolor stuff here. It gets a little bit messy. Maybe I'll have to kind of regroup a little bit here to get the studio lined up to do that. But I'd love to be able to do some interactive watercolor studies, just maybe compositional empathy studies and speed form studies through watercolor, because it's just, to me, it's a great medium. Very, very romantic, extremely embellishing, and at the same time inspiring. Once you get to know it, once you begin to see how the results of it, it's to me, it's inspiring. So let me go through the process here. I'm going to start here with a very, very simplified, and believe me, this is a very small portfolio of automotive work I've been doing over the past few months. Even at my studio at home, I'll still crank out some watercolor material and so forth. I've got something to plant in the office now that I'm working on, but I'm always working on this thing behind the scenes. I've not done it live here yet, but as I said a few moments ago, I'd love to be able to take that whole opportunity here to do maybe a couple of them in the new year on my Twitch program here live. So all that to say is you're going to go through a series of sketches here. I'm going to start with some automotive work, then we'll move into some landscape work. And hey, how are you, Tezu34? Hi, I want to offer a promotion for your channel. Oh, it's a bot thing. Okay, sorry about that. So what you're going to see is a combination of maybe some work that's done for some client-based individuals, and at the same time, really looking forward to doing some things just from the practice point of view to keep my hands in it and to keep active with it. Rolls-Royce piece was done. That's about 5x7. Most of these studies, a little freehand sketch first, kind of lay it all down, and I'll show you later on in the stream here how that comes about with a little pencil sketch and begin to move into it. And one of the things you'll notice here, especially in automotive stuff, there's much more of a broader range color palette. But when I go into landscape work, I see a much more restrictive color palette to work with here. So all that to say that this was done for a client, Rolls-Royce, a couple of years ago, which is a very small composition piece, watercolor study. Looks very intricate, but at the same time, you've got to really know where to leave the paper come through and where to lay the tones in, and just kind of go through the brush systems and really plan it out ahead of time. This is what I meant by commenting earlier about knowing the end from the beginning. The sketch was already set. I knew what the color values were going to be, putting the ghost, the Lady Victory up on the hood ornament and so forth behind it. There's a little simple watercolor vignette to kind of enhance the form. And that's it. And then this one over here was done for a friend in England who has a very nice collection of Lancia Aurelios. So it's a very interesting automobile. You can't see it in this view. Very few machines made, very rare automobile, but at the same time, the elevation on this thing, the side view is extremely long wheelbase. I was surprised when I saw that some of the photographs that came in with this piece, really amazing stretch wheelbase, much longer than I expected. I always thought that that car was very compact with the minimum wheelbase, very short. That's like a swib of some sort, but not the case. A very long wheelbase. So those are the first two we'll start with here. The Rolls Royce and the Lancia. Let's move along here with a couple of here. We're just going to shuffle them in as we go. Ford GT. And at the same time, it's companion piece here. Let's see if we can kind of line these guys up, get them in the screen here. These were done for, again, collectors some time ago. Ford GT40, just a nice little vignette for front three-quarter study, showing a little bit of watercolor, very simple palette again, grays and reds and some neutral tints, and putting that all together. And then this guy has always been very, very interesting. This is a Cunningham C4R 1952 variety, just a very dramatic front view, and that's not an exaggeration. That front view is that sculptural. But again, just wanted to, with the American racing colors, and Briggs Cunningham was a very, very prominent manufacturer and coach builder in the motorsports world. So this kind of a tribute to him and a little study for his operation. So again, the GT40 and the Briggs Cunningham. There's another couple of them here. Let's move along here. Again. Next series here, I'll go one by one now. This is a little watercolor study for Audi. This is the infamous, for example, the big, huge animal called the C series. Auto Union, amazing piece of machinery. This thing was absolutely massive. This is Bernd Brosmeyer, very quick little pen sketch first, laying in some colors here. Very simple palette with a little bit of like a light rose of some sort behind it all to kind of put that all together. Little three-quarter view on this thing, and just a nice simple little vignette. This is a very quick sketch. I remember doing this thing. I put the ballpoint pen sketch in first and laid in some of the color, very simple grays, value study with a little bit of red added, obviously. Probably went from start to finish by maybe 45 minutes. Some cases, let me stop here. In some cases, I like to really go through a speed cycle, see how much I can get done in a very fresh, spontaneous way without overworking things, so to speak. And other times, we'll just slow it all down and get more detail. You'll see that as we go through these studies here this afternoon. So again, this is a little bit of a study here. Let's kind of line these up one by one. This is an interesting little vignette up on top here. Yeah, we can get those together. Good deal, I think. Let's get this out of the way. This is Bernd Brosmeyer, again, one of the pilots for Mercedes-Benz. This is a 1937 Speedliner. For record car purposes, back in the 30s in the Autobahns, when Mercedes was looking at high-speed performance, closed-bodied machines or closed-wheel machines, and this one happened to be one of the first streamliners they did. And from this generation on, this is I think 1937, from this generation on, they really started to do some very unique-looking land speed record cars, R-E-K-K-O-R-D, record cars, to really kind of interesting surface work. And then, of course, its companion Auto Union, seeing this results and the questions and the results of some of the streamliners that Mercedes was putting out, they threw their hat in the ring too with some really very dramatic different speed form. They said that they went after records as well. So that was interesting. It's a Speedliner, Mercedes-Benz 1937 with Bernd Brosmeyer at the helm. And again, another study here. This was done for an interesting fellow who's a client down in South Carolina. I put this piece together. This is original for him. It's going down there very shortly. This is a very interesting V16 machine that Juan Manuel Fangio, it's a BRM machine, V16. And that Fangio piloted in the Formula Libre in Silverstone in England in 1953. This is a good example of getting a little more detail down. We notice some of this stuff here. For example, this first study, a lot more spontaneous, less complication, very simple palette, and just being very, very gestural in a sense. This one is a much more detailed piece, getting into some of the cockpit work, some of the instrumentation, the gauging. And here, for example, and just slowing it all down, much more detail in some of the luring work on the hood system and the wheel graphics, exhaust and so forth, and put a little bit of background into it. And then this is a corporate logo which I thought was very strange for BRM. It almost looks too contemporary for an automobile manufacturer, BRM, back in the 30s when this thing was put together, when it started, and into the 50s when it terminated. So this was, again, the Fangio machine that in watercolor. Again, lots of fun. I mean, just laying down this, just building up layers, for example, with a little bit of a lighter green and going into a darker combination. And one thing you don't do, for example, for what it's worth here, when you get into a darker value, for example, you do not mix black into it. This is not a combination of black and light green. It's more of a hunter green, where it's an actually really neat watercolor. Almost a black green, but it still has that that dark forest green look to it. So it gives you that same combination of reflective studies, both with what the light source is doing, with the reflective sources are doing. I think one of the big mistakes we make in watercolor, any given sketch, even marker sketches or whatever, that we try to look a yellow color, we put black into it for shadow. It's really not, if you do a yellow machine, it usually goes down into the ochres and into the dark brown. It stays in the value family and just rolls into the light spectrum from light to dark, but you never add black to create a shadow or reflection look. This might look like a black surface down here, but it's not. It's a very dark hunter's green, which is really a neat combination. The light, the hunter's green, and some of the pastel hooker's green up on top. So the combination really worked very well. So that's another little study here. And this one, this actually I'll show you here. I've got one here. Oh, that's a double matte. Okay, got it. Very good. This one's still working here. I'm just trying to show you how I start with a little study. This was done without a sketch. This is blocking in the basic forms and shapes. This is Mike Hawthorne's 1952 Ferrari P250. And I'm going to finish it off with some of the logo work up on top, a little bit of background work like we did with Fangio's. But I'm just blocking in color here. I'm going to go back in and notice a little bit flat yet, I think, and I'm going to go back in and add some more burgundies down below to get some more shadow into this thing, and to take care of some cockpit work, more reflection in the glass and the windscreen, and get the wire wheels laid in. So all this is yet to come. I just thought I'd give you a little bit of insight as to what the building blocks look like. And again, I'll come back with a little more highlight. And again, what's missing here is a lot of really good deep shadow coming from the ground reflection, the shadow back into the form itself. So all this down below, save this little airfoil here. We'll go back in and go a little deeper and a little bit of shadow underneath the exhaust pipe, adding some of the graphics, number graphics, and will help as well. So in study here, and that's going to be constantly in motion. This next one here is interesting. This is a nice little combination, Alfa Romeo Hill Climb Special. I'm looking at the Mille Miglia in 1926. It's a real gestury quick sketch, and again, this is without a drawing underneath it. Just kind of laid in some background color, laid in the actual forms itself, and just kind of blocked in some shapes with some value work and the like, and laid the tires down, and a little bit of detail in the exhaust and hood and the hood ornament and some of the other, and the driver kind of pushing into the turn. Very quick, spontaneous piece. And again, this is one of those exercises, I think, in this case, where I really kind of moved through it very quickly because there wasn't a real sketch. I just laid in, mixed up like a neutral tint palette for the grays, watered it down quite a bit, and again, right back in, I just laid in certain surfaces and came back in and kind of defined it with a little bit of ballpoint pen. Was all said and done once the actual forms are all put together. So there's always a case of combinations of things. For example, you might go watercolor, ballpoint pen, pencil sketch. But one thing you don't do, for example, I never mix media, for example, other than just maybe some drawing back into the forms themselves. Very difficult to go back in, especially on watercolor board and paper, to kind of add pastels and kind of blend it. It just doesn't look right. It muddies it up. And interesting comment, too, on that whole process. One of the things I'm learning as I go through the process of working with this whole process of watercolor is very unique to me in terms of how to begin to put the system together. I think I've always really struggled with, and then still do. I'm learning how to get better at it, but the transparencies at it, keeping the kind of stuff like this, where it gets much more transparent, much more lucid, that becomes more of a combination of water and water combination with the paint, as opposed to getting too much paint involved in the system, and it kind of muddies it up a little bit. And you'll see some examples later on about how that can really become an issue. So over the course of the last month or so, I've really practiced getting more transparent with the watercolor systems themselves, and keeping things simple and adding more water so it's much more luminous when you lay it down on the surface. Take it from there. So this little alpha study, that was fun to do. And let's move along here. This is Jody Schechter. Very interesting commentary. It's Jody Schechter on the six-wheel Tyrrell Elf. Again, a lot of background work to kind of lay it in here. This is a very complicated piece of work. This took a little bit of time to do. Not so much for the actual vehicle itself, but the actual laying in some of the foreground and background to not complicate life and give a little more of an impact in terms of putting things together. So this is Jody Schechter in the six-wheel Elf Tyrrell, which is a very interesting setup for Formula One machines, but it never really qualified as being a real contender. It was very novel, very interesting thing done for the purpose of traction and aerodynamics. But it, as I said, it never really kind of took off from the point of view of being a very formidable piece of information to work with. So they gave that up and went to the next generation. I think this is prior to, no, this is after Jackie Stewart's generation. I think it might have been the same time frame. But interesting, I mean, very, very small machine. These wheels are just really tiny, almost like little go-kart wheels, and these big, huge tires in the rear end of this thing. I just thought it'd be an interesting concept to do in the watercolor study. So there we are with the Tyrrell machine. And last but not least, one more here. I think we've got, yeah, this is the, this is done for a client piece. I don't know if we can get it all in or not. This is the Gulfstream 917. Again, very simple, romantic little watercolor behind it. This is what I'm getting at as far as this isn't too bad down here. Let me just kind of drop this down a little bit so you can see what the rest of that form, there it is. Not bad up and through here, but getting some of the transparencies to work. We're in areas like this or like this. Very interesting to notice. If you're not careful, it gets pretty muddy in a hurry here. So I'm trying to really work quickly to get some of the shapes down and let the background do some of the work to kind of bounce it all off and being very specific with some of the graphics and the headlamp bearings and so forth. The whole process together. And while I'm at it too, I think what I'm interested in doing is maybe go back into the files here. This is just for a portion of some of the watercolor I've got for automobile art. Just had to take a selection of some of the different varieties of things to look at here to work with. But while I'm at it here, I think with the website coming on board here, we're trying to regrouping and recrafting the entire website. A little bit fresher, adding more things to it. Obviously, we've said that in the past. We're trying to take our time to do it right with t-shirts and more printed poster work. And I think I'm going to go back and look at some of these illustrations and begin to put some of these on t-shirts as well as print work. So if you have any input or any commentary on what you've seen thus far and things you would like or dislike, let me know. And that can be contacted here at jim@drcontrast.com is my email address. I'm really interested in getting your feedback on what in the world we could do with this thing to take it into the next level here. I've got so much stuff from the automotive world and some of the print world on my website. I'd love to be able to do that, but I need some assistance as to which way to go, which are going to be the most popular things to look at, which ones are not. So all those things factor into how to all together. So that kind of wraps up the automotive side of it. So let's kind of take a look at what we've got here. Back and look at some things that are done. Let me stack these up a little bit here, and we'll go down the line here with these guys. So now we're going to switch gears and go to some landscape work. And I think what I'm going to start with this. Let's go here. This one. Let's kind of put these together here. Let's kind of put them side by side. There's a couple of little vignette studies here on just landscape work. And before I go any further, stated earlier is this to me the complication of watercolor. Even though it's my favorite medium, it's very touchy. Great to work with, and learned an awful lot. I think one of the greatest things about watercolor is this. What I learned here from the fine art side, if you want to call this fine art, to me it's just watercolor studies, but I practice both sides as best I can here when time permits, and I really love doing the watercolor stuff, as I stated. But what I found in going through this whole process of working with landscape work, whether it's building architecture or pastoral scenes of some sort, no matter what it is always interesting to me how I take some of these techniques and bring it right back into the automobile world that I do, or the product design world. There's always an interface or a sharing of things and dynamics that work together to kind of keep your work fresh. And that's why, over the course of time and over the years, I've never really fallen in love with any one particular approach. I do have favorites, like I said, watercolor, but I move around tone paper, watercolor, marker, pastel, Prismacolor pencil sketches, graphite studies. All that's part of the mix, and I think that's what keeps it fluid and keeps it intriguing from the point of view of being very fresh. So all that to say that this, to me, this dimension, landscape watercolor, to me is an incredible and powerful approach to take tools and things learned here and bring it right back into the design world for client work, for presentation pieces when I work with clients. Very, very helpful. So let's go put these guys together. We'll just line these up here. There's down. Got some more here. There's a couple more here. Same little. Notice again, how the whole palette really simplifies here itself quite a bit. Interesting how, notice one's more of a fishing harbor. Um, this is just, both of these studies are created. I mean, there's not an image or a photograph that I found. They're just images that would be kind of a neat composition when you get darks against lights. And again, getting a little bit better with some of the transparencies here. Not as forced. Same with this stuff over here. It's getting a little bit better, a little more luminous in terms of letting the reflection of the sky into the actual water itself. Being very simple with a palette like siennas and umbers and the like. Just keeping it very low profile and doing the job of it very, very cleanly. And I think a lot of it is letting the paper open up a little bit. Some cases really breathe. Even though this is filled in, it's not as saturated as it should, as it could have gotten. So again, real quick these sketches from start to finish. I can honestly tell you, I put a time frame on these guys. Start to finish about an hour, no longer an hour. Let's say 60 to 65 minutes. Any further than that, you begin to muddy it up and overwork it. So I've kept them really fresh and simple. So there's another couple here to work with here. Watercolors. Let's move along here. We'll just kind of separate them up. Pardon me for reaching in here. Another couple of studies, same process, getting into the same overall approach. And now again, notice how simple the palettes are. Dark greens, some neutral sands, some charcoal grays, and a little bit of sepia. Kind of watered down a little bit. Same with this, same set of circumstances. Getting a real simple reflection in the pond here. This guy, little farmhouse scene. Again, little sky tone. Getting some much better, I think, in areas like this and in areas here, letting this transparency come through. To me, that's one of the most difficult things about watercolor, keeping it very lucid and transparent, because you can get really muddy in a hurry. And you'll see some examples of that down the line here as we go through this whole process. So really a lot of fun, and I enjoy it because, again, these sketches as well, both of these studies, no more about 65 to a 70-minute cycle. Again, the reason I go that route is to keep it nice and simple, and then not to overwork it and then overbuild it. So let's go with those guys. We're done here. We'll move it right along. And a couple more pieces here. Let's go this route here. This is one, a little landscape study out of Pennsylvania. A little barn study here. Again, very comprehensive. Again, notice how very simple and lucid the landscape is. A little background work with some of the trees and the forest line behind the barn itself. Like the pond out front, a little more reflection into this thing. And again, a very simple sky. So this is about maybe, 6 by 12 in that neighborhood. Again, quick little study. Probably about an hour and a half again at the most. And again, I keep bringing up this time factor because I think it's really critical in watercolor, that especially watercolor, because you've only got so much of an opportunity to keep it saturated, keep it fluid, and add mix to it. And the quicker you go, the fresher it gets. And I think I'm learning that as well as I go through the cycle of putting these pieces together. So it's been a real great lesson and really discipline in getting it all taken care of here. So that's a little watercolor study again. Moving to this guy here, a couple of this one, get these go side by side. This was Monte Castle. Will go side? No, not really. Yeah, maybe. Get these guys going side by side. Right. Let's go one at a time here. A little watercolor study here. Again, notice what happens, for example, when you get a lot of texture and a lot of color involved in the air. Now this reads okay. The lighthouse is all right, but this is the lighthouse up at Squirrel Point, Maine. Again, it's an actual destination. This is one I'd actually use a reference for. If I were to go back and do this again, I'd really simplify this in the background, the foreground. I mean, it works, but it still has, it gets that. Notice how simple some of the transparencies are working here, and I want to get more transparent in these areas if I possibly can. So I don't know if I'll go back into this and redo it, or I'll just start another composition and really practice this whole idea of watercolor transparency. It is so vital. I think the fresher and the more luminous it gets, it's not bad up in areas like here. It gets a little bit stronger, but down and through here, there's so much underbrush and foliage. You kind of overwork the stuff, at least I have here in this case. I think I could do a lot better. I think I've really kind of practiced myself into a corner here. And I want to make sure that everything I do a watercolor, I want to get much faster, much fresher, and far more luminous. Luminous meaning letting the watercolor saturate and get very much more transparent, so it gets the job done here. So again, this is done really about, maybe 6-7 months ago. And I think from that point, from this sketch on, I've improved quite a bit. I mean, I'm still learning, almost understand, but I think I've improved getting the transparencies down and being much quicker in the sketch. So there's another little study here. Let's put these off to one side. And we'll move on to another series here, a whole series of Scottish castles. Again, very simple. Notice a lot of very transparency into here, of reflective quality into the actual moor itself, or the actual, pardon me, the lake or the loch. And then again, I think this castle, they're not bad. I mean, getting some simple values down and keeping the textures and the palette light, and not so much, not a lot of complication. Very simple background color here, like some neutral sands, a little bit of grays, and again, the dark greens, hunter green and hooker green, to get some of the landscape work down, and getting some of this real boggy kind of foreground in the actual loch itself to work for you. Again, it's another study. Let's go this route here. This is, again, I think you'll recognize this landmark. This is Eilean Dunnan, which is Castle Island, Dunnan in Scotland. Very famous with the bridge here. This is dear to my heart, being a Scotsman by birth. Both of these areas, for example, I think this is Kilburn Castle, and also Eilean Dunnan up in the Firth is really beautiful piece of landscape. This was an interesting study in itself. Not this watercolor, but the actual site. It was in huge disrepair back in the 30s and 40s. The Campbells, it was one of their outposts up on the lochs of Ayr and near Dorney, and near Dorney, Scotland. It was huge disrepair back in the 20s or 30s. Then the Federation of the Scottish Government came in, began to resurrect this thing and put funding into the Scottish Reserve, and made it a landmark and an icon. And they completely renovated the entire castle now. And it's a tremendously attractive tourist attraction in that part of the country. So again, a little watercolor study. And again, notice again how I've talked about getting a little bit muddy down through here. This whole banking, for example, a lot cleaner than some of the actual landscape itself. A little bit brighter. But again, learning how to put this stuff together is really kind of part of the whole mission. So I'm getting a little stronger with that as well as I go through the process here. Again, keeping it very simple back and through here. And again, the background work, a little bit better, a little bit more reflective sky. Every time you go through it, you learn something. And I think that's a neat thing about it. I mean, I've always been a practitioner, and especially in the creative side of life, much more amenable to learning something. If I lay down a watercolor and I get too muddy with it, I just let it go. Okay, that's done. Now, what have I looked at here to make the next one better? And I think that's what we all have to really concentrate on. We'll go through ups and downs and some valleys here and there, but putting pieces together and getting some product work to be very successful, whether it's watercolor work or fine art or design work. But you're always in transition of learning something about your craft. At least I am, and I know you are as well. So again, these are the two castle studies, and let's move along here. This is interesting. Nice little process here in terms of putting together. Now, this is a really ultra simplified composition. This was the intent here was to keep it real minimal. Two colors, actually three: cobalt blue, and there's a neutral sand, and Payne's gray. What can I do with that? Just a kind of simple washes, putting it in place, and just laying down a texture. So let the composition do the work. This one, I hate to confess this, but I think this is probably one of the most, not my favorite, but probably the most unique technique I like to work with, keeping it really abstract in a sense, keeping it very minimal, but saying a real faint in terms of being, it's there, but it's not there. Almost ghost-like quality to it. I think that's what I really enjoy doing. I'm not really big on doing a lot of detail work. I do that, but I think this approach to me has taught me an awful lot in terms of keeping things transparent, keeping them quick, and making very good decisions in terms of let the page do the work for you. So that's one of the offshoots of this guy. We'll move along here with the next one. And this is into, again, a little study here. Again, this is in Kinderdijk in Holland. It's down the lake areas here, and getting just, again, little windmills, and then taking, again, a little bit more, getting a little bit stronger with some of the foreground work here, and running it back in and doing some neat stuff. And again, much more transparent in the sky. I mean, getting a little bit better as I go. This was done pretty recently. So I think, again, notice a much stronger approach to keeping things real faint and transparent. Again, luminous, the term I use. For example, much more lighthearted, much more transparent. Let it come through and do a really good job in terms of putting together some of the systems we're dealing with here. Again, this was done very quickly here. Again, this one was, I can honestly tell you, when I started this, I kept, in my mind was, all right, I'm going to go no more than an hour and 10 minutes, or an hour, or let's see, an hour and 15 minutes, 75 minutes at the most. And I completed it within that time frame, and I was much happier with it because it's a little fresher. Again, still learning an awful lot. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not there yet. Far from it. But every time I go through it, I'm learning something better about this medium, and I take this stuff and bring it back into product work, and vice versa. So for me, that's a real asset. I mean, that to me is a strength because I still like to build on that. Changing mediums, changing technique, changing operation, keeps it fresh from day to day. And I tell you what, I've never been more excited about the creative process. It's turned inside out in terms of keeping me enthused, and I think that's the key thing right there. I've never lost sight of the fact that what we do is magical, and it's interesting to watch it all come together. So that's a little watercolor study in Holland, and then the last one, I think you've seen this one before. This is a piece done for Bass Harbor in Maine. This site actually exists. Again, a little more getting some neat stuff happening through here. But again, a lot more transparency. I had to be working these trees a little bit more. There's a little bit more on the dense side. They're pretty thick, but nonetheless, I think it worked a little bit better for us. And again, some of the building work was a very simple operation, and the background behind it, and getting some of this very foreground work to come into this rock study. This thing sits up on a cliff, so it's a very picturesque location. And I think one of the things that was successful in this study was, again, the watercolor fluid system in the sky was much better, getting a lot lighter, and letting the composition come forward off the page itself was unique into this study being done. So I think that kind of wraps it up here. I mean, I don't want to get into a situation where you go on and on and that's what I'll show you. This is where I usually start. This is a little pencil sketch in a case like this. This is the planet when I went back to over here. These earlier studies. This is how we start. For example, something like that begins with something like this. There's the actual pencil sketch, different composition altogether, but there's the actual pencil sketch I'll start with. Then what I do is I'll come back in and frame off the area, lay in the watercolor, some of the technique work, and come back in and pick up some of the detail work on the composition. This little guy I'm going to work on tonight over the weekend is going to a friend as a Christmas gift, so that'll be part of his surprise here. But again, I just wanted to see it all started. Sometimes I'll use a sketch to begin with, and sometimes I'll just go pure into the drawing itself and just kind of go back in after it's done and detail some of the work with a pen. Or again, one of the great systems, like using this guy, this Winsor Newton pen, is terrific to work with in small detail pieces like this. So just wanted to wrap it up today by showing you how it all begins, what the end product is, and what the actual pencil sketch begins to look like. So there we are, gang. Really appreciate you taking the time to be on board here today. I hope this has been of some interest to you as much as I have had putting it all together. We're just going to put this up as a wrap up here, this big portion 917. Lots of fun. I hope you have a great weekend. And again, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. And very brief, but at the same time, just an overview of both automobile work and some landscape work. And again, what you've seen here today is just a tip of the iceberg. I've got things in watercolor that you would not believe. Some recent, some not so recent, but I think what I've looked at here today was I wanted to lay that out there and see what you felt about it. And if you don't mind, I'd really appreciate some feedback on my website at jim@drcontrast.com. If you wanted me to put together maybe a little vignette study in the future here on my stream program of some watercolor work, how to start it and what to go through the process, is not to insult you, but to just show maybe some of the variations and things we talked about here today in watercolor, I'd love to do that because, again, I've said it millions of times. I love the medium, and I think it'd be fun to work with it in addition to some of the things we're doing as well. Give you a little bit of a heads up here. In addition to some of the watercolor stuff I'd like to do in the future as far as streams are concerned, we'll go into things like some speed form work with some litho pad material, some speed form work with the charcoal bit, just laying strike lines down with empathy. We'll go back into a facelift on what I think is probably the most difficult vehicle to ever change, and that would be the Bentley Speed 6 Blue Train Special. Unbelievable piece of machinery. I'm going to tackle that guy, so we can do a little contemporary version of that, and then who knows what's coming on from there. Maybe do a lot of variation on some product work and some other additional things to come along. But if you have anything you want me to work on, please feel free to drop me a note here. Again, my website address is jim@drcontrast.com. And I'll be more than happy to oblige if I'm able to do so. And last but not least, I've got a pretty good set of drawing systems set up on drcontrast.com. And that's my website. And you'll see a series of 9 lessons there. If it can be of some help to you from the drawing point of view, please tune into that and take a look at it and let me know what you think. And then again, not to be redundant, but one last time, let me know what you think about this watercolor stuff. And should I go ahead and put together maybe a couple little streams here in the future, kind of show it all comes together? I'd be happy to do that. And above all else, again, cannot thank you enough for the time spent here today. Gang, good to have you on board. Hope you have a great weekend, and we'll hopefully see you next Tuesday at the same time. And then at that time, I think I'm going to work on some things over the weekend as far as timing and reference is concerned. I might, excuse me, I might be exchanging Tuesday, Thursdays for a Wednesday afternoon, go a little longer and do some things on the stream program area. But again, if that works for you, and again, I have a moment to give me some feedback at my website, my email address, I'd love to hear from you on that matter as well. So take care of yourself. Thanks again for tuning in. I will sign off with this because it's the most important part of the entire day. Never forget to dare to be great, because you are. Have a good one, gang. Thanks again. Take care. Bye-bye.